Murals like these in a Catholic housing project in Belfast, Northern Ireland, are a reflection of community identity. When Brendan Hughes named the man he claimed was responsible for Jean McConville's death, a mural in his memory was painted over, only recently redone. His words in interviews stored at Boston College in the United States split the community.
The special squad was brought in the operation then, called the Unknowns. You know, when anyone needed to be taken away, they've normally done it. I had no control over this squad. Jerry had control over this particular squad.
Jerry was Jerry Adams, Hughes's IRA commander in the early 1970s. They were best friends, went to jail together.
Jerry Adams was probably the most key IRA leader that the armed Republican campaign produced, and he was at the heart of every decision and every strategic direction that the IRA took.
Adams rocketed through the IRA ranks, emerging decades later as the most powerful Catholic politician, president of the most popular Catholic party in Northern Ireland, Sinn Féin. He was able to silence IRA guns for the Good Friday peace agreement that ended decades of bloodshed. And today is beyond doubt the most influential and important Catholic politician in Northern Ireland. Jerry Adams has refused our request for an interview, but in the past he has said many times he was never in the IRA and certainly never involved in the death of Jean McConville. His press spokesman goes further, labelling Adams' critics as anti the peace process. And Adams has labelled as libelous any allegation he was involved in the McConville murder.
Brendan Hughes wasn't the type that told lies.
Richard O'Rourke, who shared a jail cell with Hughes, remembers just how close he and Adams were.
Him and Adams was inseparable, and ideologically they were virtually inseparable. His whole talk was about Jerry.
I trusted the man at that time, and I trusted his political manoeuvre and his political direction.
By the late 1970s, Hughes, O'Rourke, McIntyre and hundreds of their IRA mates were in prison. In 1980, Hughes and several other IRA prisoners upped the ante and went on hunger strike.
I remember the first day of the hunger strike, and I came and left the food at the door of the cell, and I remember the feeling then of looking around the cell and saying to myself, this is the first day of the last day of my life.
It failed, quickly replaced by another. After 66 days, jail-bound hunger striker Bobby Sands died, but not before he was elected to the British government. Several 100,000 turned out for his funeral. 9 more hunger strikers were to die. On the inside, O'Rourke ran the IRA's propaganda. Outside the jail, he says, Adams ran negotiations.
When the British government came and made a secret offer to us, the prison leadership through an outside committee that was controlled by Jerry Adams.
In his book, The Blanket Man, that O'Rourke says he was inspired to write after recording his interviews for Boston College archives, he details what he says was the truth of the hunger strike.
I have never ever veered off what I believe to be the essence of what happened. The last 6 hunger strikers didn't need to die, but that all came out of Boston.
He blamed Adams for withholding a government offer to end the strike. O'Rourke was ostracised, cut off from the community he loved. But when British government records were released last year, detailing the offer made to the prisoners, O'Rourke says he was vindicated.
I absolutely trust Brendan Hughes. Brendan Hughes, in my view, never ever told me any lies.
And Jerry Adams has?
Yes, of course he has. He's told lies about the hunger strike to try and cover up his involvement. Jerry Adams will tell lies if he has to. It's water off a duck's back to him.
O'Rourke is not alone in his perception. Adams' denial of IRA membership has driven some of Adams' most faithful away from him.
I feel absolutely disgusted when he abandons the IRA volunteers and he can't stand shoulder to shoulder with them. I can understand him not admitting being a member of the IRA because it could lead to prosecution. But I cannot understand why he creates this false narrative that he was never in it.
It means that people like myself have to carry the responsibility of all those deaths. Jerry was a major player in the war, and yet he's standing there denying it.
If even part of the Boston College archives end up in police hands, Adams' denials could face more challenges than they have in the past. While Hugh's interview would be inadmissible in court because he's dead, the 6 others identified by a US judge as mentioning Jean McConville are still alive. This could mean embarrassment for Adams rather than jail.
There's a widespread view that it's very, very hard to imagine that actually happening. It's hard to imagine, but if it did happen, it would create problems.
Lord Bew was instrumental in paving the way for the Boston College archive. Like many in Northern Ireland, sees Adams' importance to the peace process as a potential protection from prosecution.
One of the reasons it would create problems is that the process has been based on Mr. Adams's ability to deliver the Republican movement, to keep most of it behind him in the process moving away from violence.
In question, the very balance between peace and justice. Much of Northern Ireland has returned to the bucolic calm for which this Emerald Isle is so romantically renowned. In these green fields, it is easy to imagine tranquility has come to stay. But close in on Belfast, always the crucible of the conflict, and the long fingers of snaking concrete and brick walls that weave mile after mile through the city tell a different story. Known as the peace walls, they keep the peace by dividing, not uniting the communities. This country is still so divided that many people are just too afraid to cross the sectarian divide, come through the gates in the peace walls, just to walk through their neighbours' communities. William Plum Smith, the former Loyalist prisoner, lives close to the peace wall and is at the forefront of building cross-community relations with his former enemies in the IRA.
So you're always working at peace. We still continue even today to work at peace, and it's a slow, long process. It's not like a water tap where you can turn it on, turn it off.
Bitter experience has taught him trouble increases as the pace of peace slows. And right now, the Boston College controversy is an impediment they don't need.
The more barriers is put up, or the more impediments is put up, it affects the peace process, delays it, maybe for a while, maybe causes an increase in violence.
Smith and others whose interviews are in the archives worry that releasing the tapes could threaten both the peace and their personal safety. But advocates for victims believe just the opposite, that the tapes are the path to peace.
We need to be seen to be looking at each of the incidents of the past with diligence and with care and with as much skill as we can bring to the peace.
McBurney represents many families still trying to get the truth about how their loved ones died and wants all the tapes in the archive given to the police.
There are details within the archives which would be much more mundane and routine pieces of information which feed into other murders, other bombings, in a much more low-key but very significant way.
Close to 4,000 people were killed during the Troubles. McBurney fears the police have picked the wrong case to get access to the archive. One of the most notorious killings, allegedly under the command of one of the most important politicians in Ireland. They could be blocked.
A lot of that information will be lost if, because of the sensational nature of the particular case that's being opened up, if you like, through the archives, because it involves Gerry Adams and because it has implications perhaps politically and so forth.
We've been quite clear as a government that can be no concept of an amnesty. So we have to support the police to have complete operational independence in pursuing every line of inquiry, in bringing those who committed crimes to justice. But I think the very simple point is no one person is above the process. No one person is above the law.
I will go to jail to protect Gerry Adams as quickly as I would go to jail to protect any other person, any individual person, possibly implicated as a result of this process. I think it's an ethical imperative.
If we get the tapes back, this may put an end to everything.
What do you think might be in those tapes?
The truth. I think that's why they don't want this. The people, you know, they want the tapes to be released because the truth's on it.
When you say they don't want it to be released, who do you mean?
The IRA and people who were interviewed in the tapes.
I think it's imperative that the tapes be handed over immediately.
But the McKendrys know what they may hear may be painful. They've already had a taste of it from Brendan Hughes, explaining why, at the time, he believed Helen's mother, a widow with 10 children, needed to be silenced.
She had a transmitter in her house. The British supplied the transmitter into her flat. We took her away, interrogated her, and she told what she was doing. She was getting paid by the British to pass on information. She deserved to be executed, I believe, because she was an informer and she put other people's lives at risk.
The IRA said that your mother was an informer, informing on their activities to the British troops.
Yeah, which is lies. I mean, my mother would not have known anything about the IRA. She, as I say, a mother of 10, at home every day with her family.
There can be little solace too, knowing that Hughes came to regret his role. It changes nothing.
Looking back on it now, what happened to the woman was wrong.
What the Boston College subpoena story is about, really fundamentally deep down, is the failure of those involved in the conflict in Northern Ireland to deal with the past, or to agree on a way to deal with the past.
I mean, if the McConville family were to succeed in this, I think of the vast number of people who will never have truth about what happened to their loved ones, because the only reason that this has come to the fore about Mrs. McConville is because people were prepared to talk in conditions which would not lead to prosecutions.
I've lived all my life in fear. They destroyed my mother's life, my family life, and they tried to destroy what life I have now. To me, it's just really a joke. They're worried about they are going to be in danger. They're the people who committed the crimes in this country. They should be worried.
McIntyre and all those involved in the Boston College archive now share the same fear. No one else will come forward to tell their secrets, and the archive's reach for truth is lost before it could expand to include police, soldiers, even British government officials who, like the IRA men, may have their bloody truths to share. All eyes are on the US courts, waiting for a ruling on whether the subpoenas will be upheld. Whatever happens, the full stories of Jean McConville's death and so many others may still never be known. Some secrets have already gone to the grave.